So today I'm going to talk about something called Subcompact Publishing. There's going to be two parts to the talk. The first part, I'm going to kind of outline some of the qualities I think that Subcompact Publishing could contain. I'm going to outline a little system that I think could be kind of neat to use to do this kind of publishing. And then I'm going to do a user interface, user experience deconstruction of a recent application that came out actually in like the last about week and a half. I was originally going to talk about Facebook a little more. I'm going to talk less about Facebook because this new thing that came out caught my attention, and you know, shiny things are kind of neat. So, to begin, the perception of the incoming disruptors is that they are low quality and therefore not really worth paying attention to. And this is Joshua Benton in a conversation with Clayton Christensen recently. Clayton published a new report in the Neiman Labs report it's focused on the news industry, but a lot of it is about disruption happening in that industry, and a lot of what he talks about is very apropos to publishing at large. And I like this quote because it is so easy, it's so easy, and it feels so good to dismiss things. I mean, just take a second right now and just dismiss anything. It feels so good, doesn't it? Just dismiss it. And I think that this is one of the easiest things to do, especially when you're an incumbent, when you're working in an industry and there's change happening in the industry, and little guys kind of appear, and you go, oh, they don't get it, they're doing it the wrong way, blah, blah, blah. So two examples of, I think, publishing-related startups that I think were super easy to dismiss and maybe not so easy to dismiss now. The first one is Wattpad. How many of you have heard of Wattpad? Most of you? Yes. Everyone's heard of Wattpad now. Wattpad is this sort of writing / genre community. Started up in Canada. They just raised $17 million with Khosla Ventures in June. Of course, raising money doesn't mean a company's good. Color raising $41 million is a great example of that. But Color raised $41 million 6 months before they had made anything. Wattpad raised $17 million 3 years after they had launched. So I asked the CEO of Wattpad, I said, hey, can you share some of your most recent statistics? And he said, sure. And so from September, the stats are 2.5 billion minutes a month spent on Wattpad, with something like 10 million active users, I think. 10,000 stories read every minute. 30,000 stories are being updated or expanded every day. And so it's a platform for publishing novels serially, so it could be chapters. Each story is a chapter of a novel. And then over 650 Wattpad writers have broken 1 million reads. So I don't think that's worth dismissing anymore, even if you don't like sexy vampires and werewolves, which is what a lot of Wattpad is. And then another company that I've been sort of maybe overly excited about recently is this company called Tokyo Otaku Mode. They're a really interesting case study in that they launched right after the earthquake in Japan, 2011. And they said, we are going to publish a bunch of material connected with otaku subculture. And otaku subculture is basically manga and anime and cosplay, stuff like that in Japan, kind of geeky, sort of artsy stuff. And they said, we're not going to build a CMS, we're not going to build on top of WordPress, we're not going to build on top of Tumblr. What we're going to do is we're just going to launch the entire enterprise as a Facebook page. And they did that. And you hear that and you go, oh my God, that's absolutely ridiculous. How can you launch any kind of publishing enterprise on a Facebook page? Well, they're up to now over 7 million fans. These are 7 million sort of engaged fans that they can publish to, because when someone likes or becomes a fan of something on Facebook, you're publishing to them whenever you add new content. And they're growing at something like 30 or 40,000 new fans a day. They're probably going to break 10 million by the end of the year. And now they're in the phase of launching what I call their shrine, which is otakumode.com. And it's going to be really interesting to see how starting with a Facebook page can lead to a much more interesting startup than starting with the complex thing over here, as opposed to building the community first. So there's a couple of examples I like to bring up about things that are easy to dismiss but probably shouldn't be dismissed anymore. There's a Buckminster Fuller quote I like. I see God in the instruments and mechanisms that work reliably. Bucky saw God in a lot of things, but I still think that this is probably an interesting quote to keep in mind, especially if you're working in the startup world. Something working reliably, simply, is something I think when you have worked in an industry for a while, you can lose sight of what it means to be simple and reliable. A counterexample to this is, I want a horn here, here, and here. You can never find a good, and the perfect car that Homer built was the Homer. And it looked like this, and it had 3 horns. And I think this is a great example of when you hire a famous person to tell you how to use the reading application. And you can go through slide after slide after slide of these incredibly complex interfaces. It just keeps going and going and going. And we've added so many weird features, and we've taken something that was so simple, that was just turning pages. You give a book to someone, they know how to use it. We've turned it into this really complex exercise. I mean, they just keep going and going, and I don't even know what this could possibly represent even. There's a little girl holding an iPad, and there's about 7,000 things you can tap. It's just, it seems like the wrong way of going about designing applications for reading. And so looking at that, it makes you think of incumbents, and it makes you think about how does this change? How is this going to change? In the recent Clayton Christensen article published by the Neiman Labs, Christensen, Skok, and Allworth put this article together about the news industry. And they talk about this kind of inception, this kind of subversion of the incumbents by startups, by small guys. And they mention the Japanese automakers. And this, it happened with Japanese automakers. They started with cheap subcompacts that were widely considered a joke. And so I went and I looked, what was this cheap subcompact that they produced? And it's this car, it's called the Honda N360. It's 2-stroke engine, 31 horsepower. It's actually a CB450 motorcycle engine they just put in the hood. So it's basically a motorcycle. People needed cars in Japan after the war, but they didn't have enough money for a car, so they built these things called these K-style cars, these light cars. And it's actually quite beautiful. I mean, looking at this, it sort of evokes a little bit of classic Porsche design and German sort of styling, and it looks actually better than a lot of cars, I think, that are being produced today. But what they did is they looked at the car industry. They said, okay, it's 1950-something, 60-something. Let's make a car, and let's forget about everything that we've done with cars up until now. Let's just look at what technology do we have right now to make the base of a car, to make the core of a car. And this is kind of what came out of it. And I like it. It's nice. It's simple. And obviously, it did really well. It did so well that GM in Detroit went bankrupt. So I asked the question, digital spaces, where is that equivalent? And so I started thinking about what would be the qualities of a... One is small issue sizes, so for like magazines. A lot of what we've done with magazines, a lot of magazines you see on the iPad, it's just taking the editorial schedule, the publishing schedule that we did for print, and it's putting it one-to-one on the iPad. So you download, the New Yorker, and you get 30 articles in the New Yorker. This is kind of a non-native solution to the way we engage content digitally. It feels non-indigenous to tablets. Because for one thing, it makes the file sizes huge. So I think subcompact qualities, it should be a really small file size. I went and checked. A lot of magazines in Newsstand, in Apple today, are still 500 megabytes, 400 megabytes, 300 megabytes. When the average tablet is about 32 gigs, 16 or 32 gigs of storage, that isn't many magazines. And the user experience of downloading them is horrible, and it takes a long time, and it feels heavy. It just feels not indigenous. And then also a reasonable subscription price that's digitally aligned to digital expectations, a fluid publishing schedule. And so what I mean by that is not hours, so you're not pushing stuff out every hour necessarily, but you're also not pushing stuff out every month. Something like every couple of days or a week or every couple of weeks feels like an indigenous publishing schedule to digital for people to be able to kind of grok the edges of the amount of content you're putting out and decide whether or not to engage it. No pagination. Just because let's keep it simple. Let's keep the digital publishing compact as simple. Oh, that's the way to do it to get maximum portability, and it just makes sense to do it in HTML now and not in any other way, really. So Christensen talks about this idea of jobs to be done. And this is an idea Christensen came up with decades ago about looking at products and markets And instead of looking at market segments, instead of saying, oh, we want to make a product for people that are 20 to 25, women who are working at startups or whatever, let's make a publication for them. He says, flip it around and look at the jobs to be done. So for example, there is a segment of the population that has 10 minutes of free time while they're waiting for coffee every day. And what do? We hire our phones. So it's hiring something to do a job for you. You hire your phone, you say, phone, entertain me for 10 minutes, give me 10 minutes of LOL cats, or give me 10 minutes of news, or give me 10 minutes of something fun, something interesting, something deep. So the basic premise is people don't go around looking for products to buy. They encounter a problem and they look for the solution. And at that point, they'll hire a product or service, right? So if we look at the current publishing industry, digital publishing industry, I'm sure there's tons of still to be done jobs, like jobs that just aren't done that well. So I thought, well, let's look at one of them today. And the job I'd like to look at is this idea of subscribing with money to a website, a publisher, or an author. It's really hard to do that, right? Like if you come to my website and you're reading an article I wrote, it's hard for me to capture that viewer, that reader, if they want to subscribe in a way that helps me, that funds me, without it feeling like a donation or without it feeling like they need to buy a t-shirt. RSS from the technical point of view of what is RSS and what is the packet made up of, but the promise that RSS brought about delivering content to people. And connected with all this is sort of a quick, lightweight, predictable, again, the Bucky phrase, reliable, cached reading experience. I feel like this all fits together in a little package. This is a job that needs... Okay, enough of this theory. Let's actually map out what this system could look like. So imagine this is your desktop. We're going to build a little desktop application right here, right now. Super, super simple. You have your title of your magazine, title of the thing you want to publish. You have 3 columns. In the left column, you have your issues. You select an issue, in the middle column you get articles, you select an article, and the article appears. And then you have a button to publish. And that's it. This is the entire system, right? And you can add articles, you can delete articles, you can edit, but you don't need collaborative tools, you don't need special other kind of WYSIWYG editors, you don't need anything magical, you just need the bare bones editorial system possible, right? So this is our starting point. This is part of our subcompact publishing system. So we have that. Here it is. It sits up there on our desktop. And so we hit the publish button. Now, where does it go, right? So obviously, it's going to go to the web. That's super easy. We know how to do that. We've been doing that for a decade. We've been pushing to the web for forever. But the other place it goes to, and this other place we haven't really done a good job yet. We haven't done a good job at capturing this other space. And the other place is to, let's say, Apple. We're going to push it to Apple, and Apple's going to push it to our iPhones and our iPads and now our iPad minis. And these are the 2 spaces that I want to focus on today. And particularly I want to focus on the Apple ecosystem. But even if you had this basic system right here, you can do neat things, and because I'm talking to a room of people that build tools and understand this, there's things you can do, like at the end of the year, you can look at all of your articles, and you can say, okay, these 6 articles here did really well because I can look at my Google Analytics for the web, and I can look at my application analytics for the iOS stuff, and I can say, let's take that and push it out to a Kindle edition of the best of for the year, something like that. So this is like just absolutely bare bones publishing system. But I really want to focus on this piece over here because I haven't seen this done well yet. And something has come out recently that has done a good job at it. But first of all, what is that? What is this? What is that area? And I think the bit of Apple that has been totally underutilized, totally undervalued and used in the wrong way is the Newsstand. Newstand's been out for about 15 or 16 months. It was released in 2011 with the WWDC. And even if you just look at these publications in Newsstand, I couldn't take a screenshot of my iPad because I don't have anything in Newsstand. How many people in here have more than one thing in Newsstand? It's like a quarter of you. How many people you have more than 5 publications in Newsstand? So it's like 4 or 5 people that have more than 5. How many of you have never used Newsstand, never touched it? Oh, that's like 80%. And even if you look at this, I mean, like these covers, what is going on with these covers? They are the most non-indigenous covers ever on any digital device. You can't, it's like micro typography. Even with a Retina display, you can't read any of the words on these covers. They don't make any sense. And if you squint just the right way and you kind of twist your head a little bit, you realize that Newsstand is an RSS reader you can charge for if you do it the right way. And so an app has come out in the last couple of weeks that I think totally embraces this, and it's dead simple, and it is so easy to dismiss. It is just so easy to dismiss, which is why I love it, because it's one of these things that you just want to go, oh, they don't get it, and oh, we don't need this, and whatever. And that thing that came out, the app that came out, is the magazine. And this is done by Marco, the creator of Instapaper. How many of you have downloaded the magazine yet and played with it? So it's about maybe a tenth or an eighth of the crowd. I recommend grabbing it. It's so simple, and ignore the content for now, because it's easy to get hung up on, oh, this isn't my kind of content, or it's not edited in the right way, or whatever. Just look at the system. Look at the system, and I'm going to break that down for us today. I'm going to go through it, deconstruct it. But if we just look at the qualities of the subcompact publishing system connected with something like the magazine, it hits on a number of these areas. 4 articles per issue feels like a great size. I would go with 3 or 5. Prime numbers tend to feel a little bit better to people than 4. 4 also means death in Japanese and Chinese, I think. So tend to avoid 4 if you can with article numbers. But 4 is a really easy to understand size. You can grok that. You understand, okay, 4, I get that, I can see it all, and I can choose to read it all or not read it all, and you get the sense of completion with an issue that I think you can never get with something like the Popular Science magazine, the way it's published today in Newsstand. It's also less than a megabyte per issue. It's super tiny. It's all text-based. It's really fast. It feels totally indigenous. It's $2.99 a month. That seems pretty reasonable. 2 issues per month. So even if you do the math, 8 articles per month, even if you're paying the writers $1,000 an article, you can kind of do the math out. You don't need that many subscribers to cover your base writing costs, and once the system is built, you don't need to really update it that much. It's a pretty simple self-sustaining system. It has no pagination, and because of that, it's got dead, super simple navigation. I love the navigation in this thing. And it's HTML-based. We ripped open the app to take a peek inside, and it's basically p-lists that define the issues, and then Article 1, Article 2, Article 3.html for all the articles in the issue. It's nice. And for people that don't know, so to publish a Newsstand is actually just a wrapper for applications. It's not like iBooks. You aren't putting it in EPUB and pushing it out there. You're actually building an application. This is what makes Newsstand kind of this weird netherland of publishing, and I think it's also one of the reasons why it hasn't been adopted by sort of more indie audiences up until the magazine, really. So Marco's actually built an application. He's built that piece of the publishing system here that lives in Newsstand. So if we go through the app and just kind of take a peek at how does it work, how do we use this thing? First of all, you don't need any departments of explanation or how to use the app, diagrams or schematics. You just swipe up and down to read. Super simple. There's a top right button for sharing, which is the same share button that's in every iOS app. Everyone knows how to use that. And there's the hamburger button for the table of contents. And it's called the hamburger button, this little guy up there, because if you look at it, it kind of looks like a hamburger. And so if you hit the hamburger button, the table of contents just slides out. And it slides out from the left, and here it is. And you can also invoke the table of contents at any point while you're reading by just swiping left to right. That's one of the advantages of doing a scroll-based navigation, is suddenly, oh wow, we can use gestures across the app screen space to pull things out, like the table of contents. And the table of contents is super simple. You don't need to zoom out. You don't need to give a macro view and show a little micro typography and how long every article is. It's just 4 things in a list because there's only 4 articles in an issue. It's really simple. And if you happen to delete everything in your magazine, this is what it looks like. It's just an even simpler list of issues and things and the introduction. And you just tap it, and within 3 seconds, you've downloaded the issue again. It feels super lightweight. It feels like it respects me as a reader and as a user, and it respects my device. It just feels great. It's one of these things that until you use it and you go, wow, why hasn't anyone else done something this simple for a publishing system? It's a little bit shocking, actually. And then looking at other pieces of the application, there really isn't much else to deconstruct in here, but Marco's done something really nice with footnotes and links. So if you tap a link, instead of pulling you out of the app immediately, it does this kind of annotated footnote. This is actually really smart. It's based off of, I think, like an XML dictionary connected with the issue. And basically, you hit a link, and it just explains what that link is or what that link will link to. And if you want to go deeper into that link, you can tap again on the link inside the footnote, and it'll take you out of the app. But what this does, the entire package feels really self-contained, and you don't feel like you're ever going to be thrown out of it. You don't feel like you're going to be in a place where you don't know what's going on. Another thing I like about it is that as you scroll, the navigation just disappears. Chances are you aren't going to be using sharing that much, so that doesn't need to be persistent on the screen at all times. If you need to share, you can scroll back up to the top and just grab it there. And the TOC, as we said, you can invoke at any moment by swiping across the screen. So that's really it. You just kind of scroll up and down to read, and you can swipe left to right to pull out the TOC. And if you tap on anything, it won't do anything. It doesn't, these hidden menu systems, like, for example, the New York Times iPhone app, is infuriating the way the menu system works, especially because, and maybe this is, then it registers 2 taps and the menus, it feels like a non-solid experience. I also don't like mixing tappable areas with non-tappable. These are just some of my pet peeves about keeping reading experiences simple and grounded and feel solid. Anyway, I thought this footnote link bit was really well done. And then, of course, it also pushes to the web, a really simple home for all these articles on the web. Marco right now is doing a truncated version of the articles. I think that, I don't think it matters. Because if you go back to Christensen's theory of jobs to be done, the reason why people are subscribing to the magazine, it's not to read the full articles. It's not because they landed on a page and they're like, oh, I want more of that article. It's because they want to be able to call on this application. They want to be able to hire this application when they have those 10 minutes free and they need to read an article, and they really enjoy the content that Marco's putting out there. It's not about getting more of the content that they didn't get online. It's about having it at the right time in the right format, super lightweight, in a super lightweight package. So I think I'd love to run an A/B test. I'd love to see Marco run an A/B test on conversions for truncated versus non-truncated articles. I also think that by not truncating the articles, then you get a lot more sharing. People are more inclined to point at the articles and share them and talk about them if it's the full text. And so basically, in 7 slides or so, Marco has built, it's pushed a newsstand that have gotten me this excited about its simplicity. But of course, does it work? Like, it's great to put this out there, but if no one cares or no one uses it, is there a point of doing it? So I asked Marco, I said, hey, Marco, I emailed him last night. I said, hey, can you give me the stats on this publication? And he said, sure. He said, I said in the foreword that if it wasn't profitable within 2 months, I'd shut it down. I reached profitability in 2 hours. After a week, I had already retroactively raised the author pay rate and started investing in more content for the future issues. And over 80% of trials have stayed so far to become subscribers, right? And of course, it's only been 2 weeks. Everyone's kind of excited about it. We'll see where it is in 6 months. And of course, again, it's easy to dismiss because you say, oh, it's Marco and he has an audience and it's easy to do these things. But I would love to put out a magazine like this. I'm sure a lot of people would love to put out a magazine like this. Guys like Jason Kotke, who sees tons of interesting information coming in front of him, I'm sure could put together great, interesting magazines like this. Maria Popova over at Brain Pickings could put together a great magazine like this. It feels like this kind of publishing system would be great for that long tail, text-based world on the web of folks that have an audience and want to give their audience something that they can hire for that job of free time or just to support the website. And so that's it, really. I mean, that's a subcompact publishing system. It's a set of instruments and mechanisms that it just works reliably and simply. I mean, you open the magazine and it just feels indigenous. It feels right. It feels like you've just taken... No questions. One question. Is ArtSpace Tokyo subcompact? No, because if I was redoing it today, I would do it in a different way. ArtSpace Tokyo was, from the beginning, I remember I was getting on the subway in Japan with my friend Paul Barron, and we just thought, I just come up with the ArtSpace Tokyo idea with Ashley Rawlings, and we're like, yeah, we're going to make this book, ArtSpace Tokyo, yeah. And I had been making books in Japan for like 5 years at that point, working with Japanese printers, trying to make these beautiful kind of literary objects, we were calling them. And, you know, I mean, Paul was like, why don't you make it a website? And I was like, no, man, this has to be a book, you know. And so we built it specifically for print, you know. And so everything we've kind of done digitally with it is building an infrastructure, I think, to were we to do it again today, or were we to do something like a New York art space, or Art Space New York, we would do it a little bit differently, and it would be something maybe more akin to, you know, what Marco's done with the magazine. It'd be kind of interesting to publish over the course of a year a book like that. You can subscribe to it and get these new art spaces over the course of a year. Or we do something a little more integrated digitally from the get-go. Maybe play with print on demand a little more. So ArtSpace Tokyo falls into that weird netherworld of things that were made before the shift really happened, and then we tried to bring it over with us. Anyway, I'll be around for the next 2 days, so just grab me and happy to chat about whatever you guys want. So, thank you.